Hi there, it's Amanda Hinman, founder of the Hinman Holistic Health Institute and creator of the Hinman Family Health Method. And I'm so excited that today you've raised your hand to learn more, how you can overcome challenges in your life. I don't know if you decided to pick up this training because you have picky eaters in your house, or maybe you're tired of the temper tantrums and the overreaction that happen on a regular basis. Or maybe you have a child that just can't seem to remember things and always is forgetful, and focusing on things is such a challenge. Either way, first of all, I want you to know that you're not alone. These challenges are very common, but there is one simple thing that you can start to pay attention to that can help reverse all three of these. So before we dive into the details of the training, I want to take a moment to share with you the link that puts all of these challenges together is really understanding the nervous system. So all of us have the nervous system in our bodies that function with two different modes. I like to use an analogy of a light switch and think of it as either your light is flipped on or it's turned off. And you're going to see throughout the training, we're going to refer to that light switch analogy quite a bit. So really remember and understand what that means. But when you understand how the nervous system works, it allows you to apply simple strategies to find balance so that you can have ways to have the amount of time that the light switch is turned on for your child be similar to the amount that it's turned off. And that really is the key to how you can overcome picky eating or hypersensitivity or difficulty concentrating and focusing. So all of these can be reversed by understanding this light switch analogy of the nervous system. So I can't wait for you to learn more, hear some new perspectives, and dive into the training. Let's get started. Dive in to understand how our nervous system works a little bit so that you can learn and see what the light switch analogy is all about. So first, think of it this way. Like I said, the nervous system has two modes of functioning, the sympathetic mode and the parasympathetic mode. So I'm going to kind of take you through a little exercise. First, I want you to imagine yourself standing in your kitchen with a sink full of dirty dishes and food left over, plates all over on the stove and everywhere. The TV turned on in the other room, your dog barking at the back door because he sees a squirrel running by, and then your son or daughter comes running in the house flipping out because they can't find their folder for school and they can't find where their homework is. So that right there is what we call the sympathetic response. So this is like your light switch has been turned on. Another way to think of it is the fight or flight response. It really is triggering all of your energy and resources in the body to focus on your environmental stimuli and put attention towards the sensory perception of your sight, your sound, your vision, your taste. All of those senses, those five senses that we think of, are like cranked way up to maximum volume. So that is beneficial when it comes to saving your life or when there's a genuine threat. However, those responses are often activated simply from having a worried thought or even a quick movement. So we'll talk a little bit more about what triggers the sympathetic response, but just think of that as, light switch turned on, volume cranked way up on all of your senses. And now take a moment to compare. The other side is the parasympathetic response. So this, imagine if you're just closing your eyes and you're peacefully reclining on a lounge chaise on the beach, a private secluded beach, and there's, the soft sand maybe underneath your toes, the warm sun sprinkling on your face and your body, blue sky, maybe a cloud or two passing, and it's nice and peaceful. The only thing around you is the soft rolling waves of the ocean. That's a very calming, relaxing environment, and that's what it's like when your parasympathetic system is activated, or that's the light switch off. And this is really important because in this phase, your body is able to give its best energy and resources to different systems and functions, like, for example, digestion and absorption. It's when your immune system is the strongest and can really fight off viruses and infections and keep your body running in tip-top shape. It's also when cells have the chance to repair and rebuild and grow. So especially for young children and children growing, the parasympathetic or light switch off phase is crucial in their healthy development. Another key thing to be aware of is the fact that during this light switch turned off mode, that's when we have access to what I think are the best resources in our brain. That's when the emotional stability centers of the brain turn on, as well as the creative and innovative thinking centers. So if you think of your brain as having different components and different parts, when the light switch is turned on, all of the energy and focus is going on your sensory perception areas of the brain. But when you have a chance to turn it off, that's when you, like I said, you can kind of get into a little bit more of the emotional side, having compassion and patience and you know, kind of calmness, as well as the creative and innovative thinking parts of the brain. So when our daughter Julia started having seizures, we really had no idea that her light was turned on all the time. But once we started to understand these 21st century changes that I talked about earlier and how they impact our lives, it was just simply a matter of a choice to find balance. And like I said, both parts or both sides of the nervous system are equally important, but the key is to have them be in harmony and be balanced so that it's not too dominating to have one on or one off too often. So let's go and talk a little bit about the change we mentioned first, the change in how we eat. As you can see from this slide here, we give two examples of macaroni and cheese, right? So one is a homemade macaroni and cheese recipe, which I think is very easy to understand and has ingredients that everyone recognizes. And the other is a packaged macaroni and cheese product, a product that is probably very familiar with many people. But the point is not so much that, you know, one food is different from another or better or worse. I don't really want to get into the semantics of what foods people should be eating here today. That's not the point, but the point is simply to eat real foods. Eat foods that contain ingredients that our bodies recognize. Because when we eat, or when we have our kids eat foods that tend to be highly processed, oftentimes you'll see that ingredient label resemble the right side, where most of the words, we don't even know what they are and can have a hard time pronouncing them. And kind of rule of thumb is, if we don't know what they are, chances are the inner workings of our internal body doesn't really know what it is either and doesn't know what to do with it. So that gets interpreted like a threat, right? If you're flooding your system with unrecognizable ingredients, it could be treated just like a virus or a bacteria or something that the body has to fight off. And so that instinctively triggers the light switch to be flipped on. Because again, like I said, that is the fight or flight response. That's when your body's naturally just trying to protect itself. So I guess the real takeaway here is, by focusing on eating real food in their natural state whenever possible, that is such a dramatic impact on the overall health and happiness of not only your kids, but your whole entire family. So some examples we have here are obviously healthy proteins and vegetables, fruits. Legumes play a valuable component in detoxifying our body, as well as essential fatty acids that come from things like avocados or nuts and seeds. So all of these real foods, things that your great-grandparents would recognize, those are things to focus on for your children and give them opportunities to eat real foods as often as possible. And just remember, another side note here about the picky eating in terms of craving sugar. When our body is light switch on mode, that is a sugar burning fuel source. So that is when your body is naturally going to crave a lot of sugar or glucose. So if your child has unrelenting cravings for sugar, that is probably a big signal that their light switch is turned on frequently. It's a natural thing to like sugar. We're born genetically and kind of evolved over time to enjoy the taste of sugar. But when you have an incessant desire for sugar, that is usually because your body is simply trying to get back to balance and find homeostasis. So that means it's burning sugar all the time, because that's the primary source of fuel when your light is flipped on. So it simply wants to keep stockpiling sugar, because it says, man, we burn through this stuff fast. We need to keep filling up here. So just kind of a side note how that relates to excess sugar cravings. All right, so now let's go on to the second change that we talked about, which is the change in our environmental stimulation. So as I mentioned before, things like, increasing number of pixels on our TV screens or tablets or phones, all of that time that we spend looking at a screen that has high pixel count, that's great because that is a really clear, sharp image, but it also has additional work for our brain to register and process and to sort through. So that is something to keep in mind to balance the amount of time visually that you're stimulated. But another component that's very often overlooked is other aspects of our senses, right? So we live in a world today where so many things are filled with fragrances. You have herbal shampoos and scented laundry detergents and fabric softeners and scented candles and aromatherapy. All of those things trigger a heightened sensory experience. So that, in effect, when your sensory input gets high, that has the effect of, again, flipping your light switch on. One of the other components that relates to that as well is noises. Like I said, when we have loud music on in the background or TV playing, in the other room frequently, or even, I don't know about you, but I used to always tell Mike that, man, oh man, sometimes there are days where I just wish I could have a mute button, because having 4 little girls, they know how to talk a lot, and it's like so much noise, it literally used to stress me out at times. But even just being aware of all of the stimulation that comes from all of our senses and finding ways to start to reduce the stimulation is one way that you can help balance your nervous system. And again, start to turn that light switch off for more hours or minutes out of every day. So a key element here is even just getting outside, because outdoors provides natural sunlight, which is a benefit. There tends to be kind of this calming effect in the body when we're outdoors and outside and kind of in our natural environment. So the more hours that you can spend outdoors where you're not under artificial lighting, also removing, like I said, some of those fragrances, using maybe unscented shampoos, or taking the candles out of the house, or just using less perfume and things like that. Those are all stimulating effects, not only for adults, but also for your children. I found that one of the key elements for Julia is, as soon as we discovered this, we started using unscented laundry detergents and dish soap and everything, because anytime she would be sleeping all day on a pillow or sheet cover that was, clearly smelled like Dawn Fresh or whatever, even though it smells good, I like it, but that is a stimulating effect on her nervous system. So one way to kind of balance that and calm that is to remove some of the stimulation. Another thing that's helpful is to start to minimize either screen time or dim lights before bedtime. Kind of allow your child the space to start to reduce and calm down the sensory stimulation in their environment, especially as they're preparing to rest and go to sleep for the night. All right, so the third major change in our society today is how we learn. And I mentioned the statistic before that on average, a child has an additional 500 hours each year of structured time. And I want to stress that this is very important to have structured time, because I know we say oftentimes for younger children, they thrive when having structure introduced into their environment, having nap time schedules and things like that. And that is true, because again, the key here is balance. But what seems to be the growing trend is that as kids enter elementary school and grade school and kind of progress on their journey, there is less and less time allocated for unstructured activities and more time spent in structured activities. And let me kind of clarify for a moment what we mean when we say structured versus unstructured. So a structured activity is essentially where, I think of the easiest way to describe it is an activity or a time spent where somebody else is kind of setting the expectation or the objective for the time, right? So obviously time spent in school for the most part is structured time for children. I mean, with the exception of recess or maybe lunchtime, usually there's a teacher or an aide or someone kind of setting the objective and the, the direction for how to utilize their time. Time even spent doing homework at home. So it's not necessarily time out of the house, but it's time spent doing homework, because again, there's an external objective or goal that has been set by someone else to achieve. Also, time spent in organized sports classes or teams, as well as music lessons. Those are all structured activities as well. And again, let me emphasize that structured time is valuable, and it does provide tremendous learning opportunities for our children. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is that it doesn't become overwhelming or imbalanced. Because like we said before, when you have that opportunity for unstructured time, that is when you tend to have the ability to turn the light switch off, because you're not trying to kind of rise to the occasion or meet some external objective. You're kind of just being who you are and in your natural state. And kids naturally are very creative and innovative. And that is when those creative and innovative parts of the brain are turned on and utilized. So as the kids get older, it's important to practice and allow opportunities for free time. And when I say free time, it can be, sometimes people say to me, like, well, if I leave my son and daughter alone and don't, if they're not in a class or not, with a structured plan, they drive each other crazy and they get in fights and it turns into a disaster. And that can be true, because quite honestly, I think that takes practice. Learning how to self-monitor and kind of be self-driven and kind of entertain yourself is not something that is inherently natural for kids. They have to kind of learn how to be motivated on their own. But that is something that as they get older, it's important to continue to include, even if it's time, spent filming movies or journaling or, playing with Legos or building forts or making I know my brothers growing up used to love making dirt bike ramps and all these races and stuff over the neighborhood. Any kind of unstructured activity where the kids really are setting the standard, they're in charge, that allows them this opportunity to let their light switch be turned off and kind of engage in that creative, innovative space in their own lives.
And this even includes, playing sports, a pickup baseball game with the kids just on their own, without a coach around. I mean, that is unstructured time as well. So
yeah, definitely. So these are 3 changes in the 21st century that really have played a substantial role in impacting how people's, and primarily kids' light switches can either be turned on or off. And like I said, just to reiterate, the important part here is to help your kids find balance. So all of these things are really just, amazing changes and things that have happened, but balance is the key. And there's a ton of different ways to get there and to find a balance that works for your family. But just always think of that light switch and check in and kind of look for signals. If there are really excessive sugar cravings, that's kind of a really red flag signal that maybe there's some shifting around that we can do to help mitigate these things. So overall, if you can just kind of recap, when we provide real foods for our kids, and we can help reduce the environmental stimulation from not only their visual stimulation, but the auditory sense, as well as touch and taste and smell in their environment. And then finally, make sure that we add in free time for their daily lives. These are all ways that you can help balance their nervous system, which reduces sugar cravings and calms hypersensitivity. Like I said, again, that emotional stability part of the brain is turned on when the light switch is flipped off. So those things help improve concentration and reduce irritability.